Here's everything you might have missed in the Book of Boba Fett Episode 4. Another Wednesday means another chapter unfolding in the Book of Boba Fett. And after last week's episode full of biker gangs, Boba's bath time getting interrupted, and an unexpected Danny Trejo appearance, Episode 4 showed us exactly how Boba and Fennec came to work together in the first place. Directed by Kevin Tancharoen, the fourth chapter, The Gathering Storm, brings Boba Fett's flashback sequences to a finish and sets the table for what should be an explosive trilogy of final episodes. With the Pyke Syndicate looming on the horizon and Boba's forces practically non-existent, there's plenty of preparation, negotiation, and recruitment that needs to be done. Now we're going to break down all the Easter eggs, subtle details, and things that you might have missed in just a moment, but as always, if you prefer to read all about it, we've got you covered over on Nerdist.com. However, to talk about this stuff in detail, obviously we have to spoil what happened in the Book of Boba Fett Episode 4. So if you haven't seen it yet, leave now before it's too late.
It was worth a shot.
Hit it, Max.
Alright, let's get into it, shall we? So the episode begins once again with Boba taking a nice back-to-tank bath at sunrise this time. Now the show wastes no time at all in sending us back to the past, where everything has that strange blue chino filter from the OC, until the color correction of memory finally kicks in. Since the Nikto biker gang, the Kintan Striders, killed the Tusken Raiders, Boba is now on his own. Riding his bantha through the desert, he comes across the skeletonized remains of another bantha and eventually arrives at Jabba's palace, which is occupied at this point by Bib Fortuna. However, once again, Boba notes there are still too many guards for him to break in by himself, so clearly he's been here multiple times before, casing the joint. Overhead, we see the twin sons of Tatooine fade into the planet's three moons, Gomrasan, Guermessa, and Chanini. Boba roasts what appears to be scurrier meat based on what he offers Fennec later in the episode. Not to be confused with womp rats, these rodent-like creatures first appeared in 1997's special edition of A New Hope. Now, fun fact, the original models for the scurriers were based on velociraptor studies developed for Jurassic Park. Now, though, they're apparently good enough for both a Boba and a bantha.
Enjoy.
Their meal is interrupted by a bright light in the night sky, and we're seeing Boba's perspective during the events of The Mandalorian Season 1, Episode 5, The Gunslinger. And this is hammered home with a musical cue straight out of Ludwig Göransson's Mandalorian score. Din Djarin and Toro had been hunting Fennec Shan's bounty, but before turning on his partner, Toro shot Fennec in the stomach and left her for dead. And that's exactly what Boba finds in the desert, a wounded Fennec Shan left to die in the sands of Tatooine, much like he was way back in Return of the Jedi. Now, to save her life, Boba takes her to a mod parlor on the outskirts of Mos Eisley. Outside, we see even more of those cybernetically enhanced bikers that Boba recruited in last week's episode. Inspired by movies like Quadrophenia and 1960s mod subculture in London, these enhanced individuals are called mods not only because of their real-life namesake, but because they have been cybernetically modified. And while robotic limbs have been a major part of Star Wars since Darth Vader first stepped onto the screen in A New Hope and Luke got a helping hand following his duel with Dad on Cloud City and Empire, it's fascinating to see Star Wars lean into this brightly colored transhuman aesthetic that's much more commonly associated with cyberpunk than space fantasy. I mean, heck, even the clinic feels like a Ripper Doc clinic straight out of Cyberpunk 2077. However, much like Luke Skywalker dreamed of leaving his dusty home behind for a life of adventure, these youths are also likely itching for much more than Tatooine has to offer. Their brightly colored, mechanically altered aesthetics would be much more at home in a place like Coruscant, but they're doing the best they can with what they've got. And that funky bass line from outside the clinic should have been a major clue as to what was coming next. Inside the mod parlor, the Doctor is played by Grammy Award-winning musician Thundercat. And honestly, if he doesn't collab with Max Rebo by the end of this series, well, I'll be very disappointed.
Hit it, Max.
At the very least, it sounds like he did the music for this particular scene, but in the meantime, he does save Fennec's life by giving her abs of steel. And yes, I do mean literal steel, as the Doc leaves the machinery exposed, which he does later cover up. Now, this marks the second series after Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that Kevin Tancharoen has directed Ming-Na Wen in, and a scene where she's getting a torso wound patched up with a high-tech solution. And speaking of exposed machinery, one of the kids inside the mod parlor also looks like he's Disney bounding as Darth Vader, complete with that little control panel on his black outfit. As for the Doc himself, he has some exposed wiring on his stomach and multiple tools that connect to his prosthetic arm, including what appears to be a super battle droid hand, which is pretty rad to see. When Fennec finally regains consciousness by the fireside, Boba cracks open a black melon for her. These desert delights contain a milk that keeps people hydrated in the Dune Sea's punishing conditions, as we saw in episode 2 of this series. As for the black melons themselves, they first appeared in 2015's Star Wars No. 7 comic, which followed Obi-Wan's Tatooinean exploits. While Fennec thinks that Boba's just going to turn her in for her bounty, Boba actually has another proposition. He needs help recovering his fire spray gunship, which Star Wars fans used to know as the Slave One until it was renamed. Boba realizes that without the protection and intimidation of his Mandalorian armor, he's much less persuasive with people like Bib Fortuna, hence why he needs Fennec's unique set of skills to help recover it. Now, the two stake out Bib Fortuna's palace, and Fennec maps the facility using a sleek drone. While that's happening, Boba bids farewell to his bantha in a really sweet scene. This shows that Boba's head-over-heels reaction to the Rancor last week wasn't a one-off. He just really, really loves animals.
Find other banthas. Make baby banthas. Go!
After that, Boba says that he wants to start what Fennec calls a Gotra, and the term Gotra in this context seemingly means crime family or organized gang, or maybe just workers' union, but in Star Wars lore, the term Gotra is most famously associated with the Droid Gotra, an extremist group that supported droid emancipation and worked for the Pyke Syndicate. First appearing in James Luceno's 2014 novel Tarkin, the Droid Gotra eventually became so powerful, their name was evoked in The Mandalorian Chapter 9 to prove just how serious a criminal was about giving Din Djarin accurate information.
My information is good, I tell you. The city of Mospelgo, I swear it by the Gotra.
And what follows is basically every video game stealth mission ever. Using the map of the facility charted by Fennec's drone, our heroes break in through a sewer pipe, scaring away a pair of womp rats. They make their way to the kitchen, where they accidentally scare a chef droid and a sous chef droid. The sous chef droid is an EV series droid, the same model as EV-99, the torturer droid in Jabba's palace in Return of the Jedi. The chef droid is a cook droid that we first saw back in Attack of the Clones. However, by the end of this scene, it's basically the chef version of General Grievous.
General Kenobi!
After that, we get a delightful Ratatouille and or Mouse Hunt inspired chase as Boba Fett tries to get his hands on the rat catcher the chef droid's called, a LEP droid making its live action debut after appearing in the Clone Wars. Fortunately, the chase is short-lived and the droid turns itself off rather than risk getting beaten to a pulp. After taking out two Gamorreans and accidentally alerting the rest of the guards, Fennec lays down suppressing fire while Boba tries his best not to totally Austin Powers the ship in this crowded hangar. During the firefight, Boba slams into other ships and Fennec turns a four-legged plunk droid full of starship fuel into the equivalent of a red barrel in any video game, blowing it up to deal splash damage to all the goons nearby. We also hear the word Slimo, which apparently means slime ball in Huttese. It's not McClunky, but it gets the job done. Now, after making their escape, Boba and Fennec hunt down the Kintan Strider gang and turn them into a fine red mist. We get a much closer look at their patch as well, which features the Kintan Strider from Dejarik, the lumbering creature that we first saw in the game in A New Hope. Ultimately, though, these goons prove no match for Boba's desert power. Next up, we see Boba fly over a familiar sight, the ruins of Jabba's sail barge from Return of the Jedi, which is directly adjacent to the Sarlacc Pit from which Boba narrowly escaped in episode 1 of this series. Boba mentions that he was trapped there all those years ago, which suggests that he spent a lot longer with the Sand People than one might have imagined from the first 3 episodes of this series. What follows is like the grossest version of the magic school bus ever made, as Boba flies dangerously close to the gaping maw of the Sarlacc. Boba is looking for his armor, which he believes is still inside the pit, but in reality was taken by the Jawas who found him in the desert. And as anyone who watched The Mandalorian knows, Boba's armor winds up in the hands of Cobb Vanth, the self-proclaimed Marshal of Mos Pelgo from The Mandalorian Season 2. Now, for a moment, it seemed like the Book of Boba Fett was going to canonize another deeply weird moment from Star Wars Legends where Boba gets eaten by the Sarlacc all over again. In the comics, Boba winds up escaping the Sarlacc when it burps him out, only to wind up aboard a Jawa sandcrawler. Boba winds up in a firefight with Han Solo, and the sandcrawler accidentally drives right back into the Sarlacc pit, thus bringing Boba Fett back to the last place on Tatooine he wants to be ever. Now back to the present, after a desperate attempt to escape, Fennec pushes Boba's buttons and unleashes a powerful sonic charge like we saw Jango use in Attack of the Clones.
Next time, don't touch my buttons.
After giving the Sarlacc some major indigestion, the creature is dead once and for all. Boba rappels down its esophagus to go spelunking in its corpse, but he doesn't find his armor. Instead, he only finds himself covered in dangerous acid. What follows is Boba shoring up his ranks by recruiting some key players, beginning with Fennec Shand. Although Fennec is reluctant to give up her freedom as an independent contractor, Boba wins her over by talking about loyalty and how he's tired of our kind dying because of the idiocy of others. We're smarter than them. It's time we took our shot. Clearly, he appeals to both her brains and her brawn as we see another flashback of these two introducing Bib to a whole world of Miss Fortuna. When Boba awakens in the bacta tank, a droid prepares his robes and tells him that he's cured. And that likely means no more flash baths this season, which is great news because while I appreciate this insight into Boba's past, it was a very clunky device that felt genuinely ridiculous at times. We also learn that the Major Domo is apparently singing like a Yuzum, which you may remember as the hairy bipedal creature that wasn't an Ewok in Return of the Jedi. Although these creatures were intended to inhabit Endor alongside those murderous furballs, they were too expensive to produce. As such, only one puppet was made, and it resided inside Jabba's palace. In the special edition, the extended musical number at Jabba's palace also added in Joe Yowza, a Yuzum singer that performed with the Max Rebo Band, hence this reference. Moving on, we return to Madame Garsa's sanctuary, where we hear more smooth jizz music from Max Rebo and company, we see Rex droids dealing cards, and a group of amped up Trandoshans celebrating a hot streak at their table. Whether his parents were killed in a tragic gambling accident, or he doesn't like these Trandoshans given his past with other Trandoshan slavers remains to be seen, but something is bothering everybody's favorite new Wookiee warrior, Black Krrsantan. The former gladiator is tying one off and drinking his body weight in space juice at the sanctuary. When the Trandoshans celebrate a little too loudly too many times, though, he starts to beat them to a pulp. Madame Garsa tries to talk him down by stroking his ego. She talks about Krrsantan's time in the fighting pit and mentions his famous electrified knuckle dusters. She even evokes Obi-Wan waxing poetic about the lightsaber being an elegant weapon for a more civilized age when she talks about how blood sport is frowned upon nowadays in these more civilized times in which they're living. Unfortunately for the Trandoshan, though, Krrsantan mistakes him for a slot machine and turns the poor bastard into a one-armed bandit by ripping it clean off. And remember Han Solo's famous words in A New Hope?
That's because a droid don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Wookiees are known to do that.
As it turns out, ripping off arms is basically a national pastime for Wookiees. Chewbacca famously ripped off Unkar Plutt's arm in a deleted scene in The Force Awakens, and then for real in Solo, A Star Wars Story. Chewie also ripped off all 4 of the Trandoshan slaver So's limbs in the comics, so suffice to say, Krrsantan is carrying on a proud tradition. And also, don't feel too bad for that guy. We know Trandoshan limbs grow back. He'll get better. Outside the cantina, Boba recruits Krrsantan to his cause, increasing his army's strength considerably. And after that, we get a Godfather-esque dinner scene where Boba holds court for the Klatooinian, Aqualish, and Trandoshan factions that have seized power. As we learned previously, these are the 3 crime families that currently control Mos Espa, and they don't exactly seem to respect Boba Fett's claim to the title of Daimyo. As confirmed by the credits, the Trandoshan leader Doc Strassi is voiced once again by Book of Boba Fett director and executive producer Robert Rodriguez. The Grinch-looking Klatooinian boss is voiced by Phil Lamar, who also played the Pyke Syndicate rep, and Garfalaquak, the Aqualish Don, is played by Barry Lowen, who's also one of Din Djarin's stunt doubles on The Mandalorian. Although Krrsantan now stands guard in the background, Boba still needs more troops. More than that, he needs these crime lords to keep their noses out of his impending war with the Pyke. So he makes them an offer they could probably totally refuse: join Boba Fett against the Pyke for seemingly no tangible gain, or remain neutral during this conflict. And to really drive his point home, he scares his dinner guests with his sweet new Rancor who dwells right beneath the dinner table, which... what a place to put your table. So with his immediate competition seemingly out of the way, Boba Fett still has a manpower problem. How can he fight off the entire Pyke Syndicate with an army consisting of himself, Fennec Shand, Krrsantan, a pair of bumbling Gamorrean guards, and a couple of droids who are basically just mechanical butlers? Well, it's simple according to Fennec. Credits can buy more muscle if you know where to look. And as she tells him this, we hear the leitmotif from The Mandalorian kick in, suggesting that Din Djarin's going to play a major part in their plans now that Take Your Son to Work Day has come to an end. But the question is the Mando the only person Boba will hire to help take on the combined might of the Pyke Syndicate? They've certainly faced worse odds on The Mandalorian, but something tells me that Boba's going to need a few more bounty hunters on his side at the bare minimum. So whether this means we'll see familiar faces like Bosk, IG-88, Forlom, or that mummy Dengar, that remains to be seen. However, as we theorized previously, this could also lead to an uneasy alliance with Kira and the Crimson Dawn. For more on that, though, make sure you check out our recent video or Michael Walsh's piece on Nerdist.com. For now, though, let's just bask in the glory that we're most likely getting a Mandalorian cameo in the final 3 episodes, and also let's start wildly speculating about what other returning Star Wars characters could rear their increasingly ugly heads as we enter the endgame for the Book of Boba Fett Season 1. Anyway, folks, there you have it. That is everything we spotted in the Book of Boba Fett, Episode 4. As we head into the final 3 episodes of the season, we have plenty of questions and theories about what lies ahead. While we count down the days until next Wednesday, we'll keep you covered with plenty of other Star Wars deep dives and theories over at Nerdist.com. But in the meantime, folks, tell us, what did you think of the Book of Boba Fett Episode 4? Did you spot anything that we missed? And who do you think Boba's going to recruit next?
Maybe we can work something out.
Let us know in the comments below, and for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, stay tuned to Nerdist.com.